Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Like set in stone, I guess I would say.
Okay,
But
sure.
Caitlin, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you being on, and I'm happy to talk to you about as the curator at the Vero Beach Museum of Art. Talk about a little bit about what you do, and why don't you give an introduction to you and what you do there?
Yeah, so thank you. I've been in my role as chief curator here at the Vero Beach Museum of Art for a little over a year. And in that time, I've worked on quite a bit of exhibitions and then focused on our collection. So that's really how the role of the chief curator works is we present exhibitions both originally curated by myself. Sometimes we'll welcome traveling exhibitions, collaborate with artists. There's a lot of different programming and exhibitions that we do. And so the collections part of my role is to help maintain, care for, present, research a collection of a little over 1,000 objects. So it's a really exciting job. There's always something going on and many things to plan for. So we have typically one large exhibition that has historically been mostly traveling shows. So that allows us the opportunity to bring in exhibitions maybe of different time periods or thematic interests, even different media than we might have in our permanent collection. So right now we have an exhibition, French Moderns, Monet to Matisse, that will close in a couple of weeks. It has been such a success. Please come in and I hope that visitors continue to check it out before it heads on to the next venue. But shows like these are so incredible because, again, the learning opportunities and just getting to visitors to see things that aren't maybe the most accessible in the area. But all that to say, we do have some really fantastic local collectors. So right now, if you were to visit the museum outside of that French Moderns exhibition, you'd see 9 works of eight of the 9 artists in that section are reflected in the French Moderns exhibition. And so that show was organized by the Brooklyn Museum. And a lot of people ask, how does it work as a curator when you're receiving an exhibition that's kind of already been organized? And
Right.
that can be a lot of different things. So sometimes there's a lot of ways to kind of reinterpret it. There's text that could be reframed, labels written in different focus areas. Some might be more biographical information. Some might be more on technique. And then how the exhibition is laid out can change. And so with this show from the Brooklyn Museum, there was a lot of opportunity there were 4 thematic sections largely, but I got to place them in certain ways to have conversations, maybe pairing works by the same artist, moving chronologically through time. But it's an incredible show because it's 100 years of change in art. This is the time that you're seeing all of the isms happen. So from Impressionism, Cubism, Post-Impressionism, Surrealism, Biomorphism, like all of these movements happening in 100 years. And our collection does have representations of some of these movements. But again, these are textbook, from the Brooklyn Museum, which is one of the only museums in the nation that was collecting works by, Monet, Matisse, Cézanne at, early 1900s when a lot of these artists were still producing these works. So those are really great shows to work on. I also get the opportunity to work with living artists, which is really exciting, and to see how artists work and how they speak about their work and what their goals are, how, working collaboratively. So I had a chance to do that with artist Robert Farber. So if you have been to the museum recently, you might have noticed an exhibition of his that are all photographs related to his fashion photography series. And I got to go visit his studio and learn more about his nearly 50-year career in the field, and then select certain objects to convey aspects of his practice. So it's just those two examples gives you a range of the types of exhibitions that you can see at the museum right now.
That's really awesome.
It's a
We
lot.
were talking. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I mean, I could never. I'm sure it takes a very deep understanding about different aspects of art and different artists, and just to be entrenched in what would be interesting to people who are coming in. I could. I mean, just hearing that 3 minute talk, a lot of it to me
Yeah.
seems kind of intimidating. But we were talking about it before we started recording, how when you go in the museum, it flows so well. And we've done, I was telling we've done some work with people and some of the events there and some of the exhibitions. And it's always, when you go in that museum, it's just so, it flows well, it all makes sense. How do you
Yeah.
decide when you're looking at exhibitions or with thousands or millions of art pieces to choose from? How do you decide, hey,
Yeah.
this is an artist or a direction or a time period that's going to resonate with people who are visiting?
Yeah, I mean, I would say having a diverse range of different approaches and time period, like having lots of different things for people to gravitate towards. Um, and, another show that I didn't mention that's currently on view is from the permanent collection. So it's a thematic show that I organize. It's called Well Dressed. And that is a great example, I think, of showing how really art shouldn't be intimidating. I mean, there's ways to interpret it that art historians are focused on, but part of why I love my job in this field is like everyone's viewpoint and interpretation of a work is valid. And so there's no right way to read or interpret a work of art. And also, people can come in and not feel that it has to be this overly educational experience. You can just experience the art, see color. I mean, there's so many studies about just like how seeing art in person is such a beneficial thing for the body and mind. But so this exhibition, Well Dressed, I feel like is maybe a great example of if getting more into the academic side of French modernisms and all these isms isn't for you. You could go into something like Well Dressed, which is focused on 4 sections. So it's looking at how clothing and portraiture um, can convey something about the sitter. So the sitter, the subject of the painting or photo or artwork, or it could say something about the artist themselves, or it could say something about how they want you to perceive the two together. So opening this show, you'll see just from a basic standpoint, really vibrant colors. Maybe you'll see patterned garments. There's a big photograph of a stole, like a covering made of wire, different kind of unusual or noteworthy items of clothing. There's a tie that's the print is an American flag of Abe Lincoln, which we know he obviously did not wear American flag printed ties, but this is helping again to convey something about Lincoln. And it's also kind of a pop art aesthetic, which is characteristic of the artist. So it's looking closely. Like I think that's what I hope that visitors do ultimately is look closely and then have an experience, whether that's learning something new or feeling a certain way. Then moving into the
Right.
other sections of that exhibition, one is called collective dress. So it's a group of about like 10 or so objects where you see identical twins wearing the same outfits, people bustling in a New York City street, a works by Isabel Bishop, where everyone's kind of wearing the same thing, a group of men all wearing bowler hats, there's sports uniforms, there's a fan favorite, which is this hyper real sculpture by Mark Seigen that looks like a security guard. I mean, it's people sometimes get a little startled by it, but because it's so real looking. But he's wearing a uniform, and so this is a way that we think of dress as like a unifying factor between people. And then another section in that show is focused on like how artists present other artists, mainly performers. So you'll see there's a dressmaker or other creatives. What is she wearing? There's a theater performance. There's jazz musicians. There's depictions of people at the piano, and like how has performance wear changed throughout time. Like that's kind of what that section's about. And then the last section is kind of items of clothing or objects themselves that could almost stand in for a person. So there's a sculpture that's incredible. It's again another hyper real piece. It looks like it's fabric. It's made from wood. It's painted wood. But so you'll see, a painting of sunglasses by Michael Craig Martin. There's an image of a dress, two jackets hanging on a wall. What is this kind of to suggest about the again, the artist or the imagined sitter subject of the work? So it's really a way to get people to look closely, I think. And then a lot of the ways that the artists have done this is just really impressive, whether, creative composition or material, like I said, with I think it's watercolor on wood. This sculpture of a hat, it just looks like you could pick it up and put it on and wear it. So that's the type of exhibition that, I think a lot of people, again, in many different artists, you can kind of, see what speaks to you.
Yeah, I that makes more sense now that you mentioned kind of the diversity of offerings. And when you compare,
Yeah.
when you compare that exhibition to the Monet to, was it Matisse exhibition, I could see
Matisse.
how there's
Yep.
different. You can definitely
Yeah.
capture different interests, especially when that's stacked onto some of the things that are more permanent there. What is coming up that you're excited about? What
Yeah.
are some of the exhibitions that are on the calendar that maybe are going to start this summer or fall, and you think people
Yeah.
should keep their eyes on?
And just also to answer your question of like, how do I pick certain things? And, back to just thinking about diverse topics and ideas, but also ideally some things that the museum hasn't done before, or maybe a lot of
Hmm.
museums haven't done before. And so one of those is an exhibition of two artists that are a collaborative pair. So there are a few collaborative artists that are working together or have, in the scheme of art history. But in with living artists, you don't see it a lot. Practically, it can pose challenges. So two people, literally painting together on one canvas,
Right.
painting over each other, that's not something, or just think of the practicalities of like, a lot of logistics go into it. And so I'm working with two artists, Annie Blazejack and Geddes Levinson, for their exhibition. I'd say it's a duo exhibition. Normally I'd say a solo exhibition if it were one artist. And that is called A Tangled Plot, and it opens July 11th. And I'm really excited about this exhibition. It does, showcase how they've, in some regards, how they've worked together. But a lot of the exhibition is focused more on the ideas that inspire them, which is like nature human relationships broadly. So they're originally from Miami, Florida, and they went to different, masters in arts programs. They lived in different cities. They were still working together. Um, they've worked together for over a decade, and have they talk a lot about when they were in grad school, like their professors didn't get it. They're like, how can you guys do this if you're in different locations? But they made it work, and they'll speak actually at the members opening reception, the two of them at a podium speaking about their work. And I first was like, but how is this going to go? But they're so united together. It's like one person speaks, the other, they're just so in sync. They did like a run through of their presentation the other day, and I was just like, this is amazing. It really shows how they collaborate, and they also have gotten to a point where they're so kind of enmeshed together
Yeah. Right.
that they, if for some reason like one artist went off and was like, I'm going to make this painting, this is the idea, they fully paint it themselves, the other artist would still say this is by us, even if her hand never touched the painting.
Wow. Very
So it's
cool.
just like it's a very interesting way to think about art. Again, like it's kind of the idea. It's also, they are great painters, and they also work in sculpture and performance. But so this exhibition, A Tangle Plot, which opens July 11th, will have mostly paintings, some ceramic pieces, and it's organized into a few sections. But you'll see, I mean, one of their series, which is how I first discovered their work, which a lot of people ask, how are you finding artists that you're interested in working with? I saw one of their paintings once and have just followed their career, been in touch, have wanted to work with them in the past. And so I'm really excited that it's happening. But their one of their earlier series is of these kind of hybrid alligator women. So it's like it's much easier to see than to describe.
Yeah, I
But you're
saw that's
seeing
on the
like,
website, I
have you
think,
seen?
right?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, and they're inspired by different myths, science fiction, a lot of novels, you know, epic poems like the Odyssey and Metamorphosis, and all sort of Macbeth, like a lot of Shakespeare influences their work. So again, there's, if you have different interests, this is a perfect show to see how that is realized in their work. Um, like Solaris is one novel and film that they often talk about, which is this like sentient water planet. They're interested in that idea of sentience and like, can nature feel and think, and but so yeah, so moving through the show, there's a section of different creatures and animals, absence of people, and then it moves into, which is, you know, talks mostly about like ecologies and like this idea of
Right.
control over nature, and how when we garden we're like making an environment. And their exhibition, I feel, and I think they would agree, really prompts more questions than answers.
Hmm.
So if you're looking to like come into this exhibition and just understand like, how do they really, like, what do they really want you to think about this, you know, what's happening with our world and the climate, and like, how do we even navigate it? They're asking this those same questions, you know.
Right,
um
right.
and then one section kind of towards the end of the exhibition is, um you'll see figures, this time female figures, in unusual, sometimes contorted poses. They're mimicking nature, they're engaging with the natural world. There's kind of like a witchiness to what they're doing, which in Macbeth there's three witches in this story about, um, you know, a moving forest, and they're like, we actually have a moving forest in Miami, the mangroves. And so it's just, there's just a lot to to unpack and get excited about with this exhibition.
That's that's really interesting to hear that you just saw their work and kept in touch with them, because
Yeah,
here I am thinking there's a secret society of, I
yeah,
mean, I guess you do have to have that eye, when you're seeing certain things and then you're kind of keeping certain
yeah,
things in mind. Maybe you got people's name on a notepad and you're not sure,
yeah,
how things work and how they're doing. But yeah,
yeah.
I pictured some, yeah, a secret society, some like wooden library, dark wood, where you all get together, you talk about art. Where do you go to
I mean,
see?
that also probably exists.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm sure it could be a successful
Yeah.
endeavor. But where do you go to find new artists, or do you try to focus mostly on things that are more established, or how much of the time of your time do you spend looking for things that might be newer?
I am going to art fairs when I can. So I'm, you know, there are several in New York and LA. Art Basel Miami is the closest and probably the one I've been to the most, which happens the first week of December every year. And then I was just in Chicago for Art Expo, which is another fair. But I also go to museums all the time. And so, you know, other museums like the Vero Beach Museum of Art are also showing, you know, emerging artists, mid-career artists, artists that have been in the art historical canon for a long time. So, you know, depending on, I was just in anytime I travel, I'm prioritizing going to the museum there. So galleries, of course, is another way. Especially when I go to New York, I just really try and go to as many as possible and just see what's on view. And galleries are also adding to their roster of artists pretty frequently as well. But it is interesting, kind of that side of how galleries work and select artists. Sometimes I think is maybe a little different than museums, but we're all, for the same, I think, for the same goal, which is, artists are so important in society. Especially when I think about like AI and all the things technologically going
Yeah.
on. It's like there is something so powerful about two people painting together, for example. So yeah, just a lot of travel. I definitely have lists in my phone. I take a million photos at all of these fairs, and then need to go through them and do from time to time. But yeah, there's no, I guess, like prescribed way of, you know, picking artist, I would say. So it's fun. I
Cool.
get to see a lot of art, which is great.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's
Yeah.
cool because when we travel as well, it's always nice to go to the museums. I'm not by any chance like I'm not, we're not, I wouldn't call myself like an art connoisseur, but I do think it's interesting when you go into some museums or places where you can tell there's a lot of um, time and effort put into what is there. And kind of like you had
Yeah.
mentioned, there is something to that, neurochemically when you're sitting there and you're
Yes.
looking at art or you're kind of taking something in, there's something
Yeah.
going on there. And
Yeah.
for a place like the Vero Beach Museum of Art, which really is so top tier, I mean, it's such an amazing place. We're so lucky to have it on the Treasure Coast. I am sure that there's always kind of the next thing, or is there not? Do you look at things seasonally? Like are you going to say, hey, for summer this is kind of what we're looking at, maybe for holiday season, or is it just kind of depends?
No, I mean, so I've just been at the museum a year, but we plan our exhibitions, or we're getting to this point where it's years and years out. And so historically, these larger traveling shows have often opened in January, around January, and then been on view for those months of high season. But I feel like the other shows that we present throughout the year are just as successful and, academically rigorous. Like it's, again, it's how you approach, and are you reading all the happy if you don't read the labels, but they're there. And so I feel like we're getting to a point where at any point of the year you're going to find a really, really exceptional exhibition or more, because we have many at once. But I'd say, yeah, in terms of like scope and like scale, those bigger shows in January, you might see like there's one show that'll open in January 2026, which is 80 works. It's quite a large show that'll spill into not just our Holmes Gallery, but Titleman Gallery. So that'll be American art, 250 years of American art, which will be an interesting, follow up to some of those isms, from French moderns we're seeing with American art, and how that there are some uniquely, you know, different slants to some of those periods with in terms of American artists. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of factors. There's logistics. I mean, people don't realize all the logistics that go into presenting exhibitions. So, every single object that comes in the building, we have to condition report, photograph, document, log. If it's a traveling show, like liaise with them to make sure they have that documentation. Open crates, unpack, of course, hang. Like sometimes, usually I have a layout set, but sometimes there's shifts during the installation. So there's just a lot of steps that go along. It's not just this is the works we want and they go up on the wall. So I oversee that piece as well.
Wow.
Which, yeah, I mean, with the show French Moderns, there's some works that are like 300, 400 pounds. So just, yeah, hopefully it looks effortless. But there's a lot that goes into it.
You
Yeah.
know, I thought about that as well when you had mentioned some of the older pieces where,
Hmm.
especially if they're traveling, if it's not permanent, if it's not, an acquired piece that's going to be living there,
Right.
I could see that being a little bit of a process, having to make sure it's transported, handled well,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Um, what
Yeah.
else? What do you think? I know that we were touching on some, just because I had mentioned it. I know that there was something coming up this fall that's going to go over the new acquisitions. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of There's a lot of, yeah, shows, I guess, coming this fall. So yeah, one is recent acquisition highlights, which is 50 artworks that will be, and this is mid-September opening.
Okay.
And they focus from the last 5 years or so of acquisitions that we add to our collection from purchases and gifts. And we just had recent major acquisitions, part of our Athena Society acquisition. We were able to acquire a couple of works from this major purchase. And it's a great, 5 year snapshot of like, what are we collecting? What does that look like? And it's mostly American art, late 19th century to a year ago, artwork created from right now, and global contemporary art, so adding works to the collection, not just American focus, but that has been a big strength of the museum's collection, has been American art. So you'll see photography, sculpture, drawing. I don't think film is represented, or video art rather. That's one. We do have a great work by Rafik Anadol, a video piece, in our lobby that you can view. But that's another area that I'm hoping to grow. Just kind of seeing where we've been for the past few years, and hopefully where we're going, which is really exciting.
That is. Well, is there anything else that you want people to know before we wrap up? We're getting after 30 minutes. And so I want to make sure we don't miss
Yeah,
anything,
sure.
because I can do like I know that you've got the upcoming exhibitions and all that, and we can link to that. But
Hmm.
if there's anything that we want to touch on that
Yeah.
might not be readily available, I just want to make sure that we get it in.
Yes, I do have one thing to add. Um, yeah, definitely vbmuseum.org is the way to go to find out all of the dates for the various shows that I've talked about that are opening. One key date that I hope everyone puts on their calendar is Saturday, July 12th. So the artists Annie Blazejack and Geddes Levinson will be here. They'll have presented the night before for our members reception. But Saturday, that's a second Saturday, so it's free for all. And they are leading a workshop twice. I believe it's an hour long. I think you need to register for it, but it would be a great opportunity. It's a guided sketching in the galleries, but they'll speak a bit about like how they work collaboratively, and
Wow,
different
that's awesome.
exercises that they've done. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. Awesome. Cool. Do you know, is that up on the website? I guess it would just be on like a second Saturday, or is there an event that's put on the
Yeah,
website, or?
it may be on the website, but I can find out and send something to you.
Yeah,
I
that'd be
I
great. I
think
mean,
there's a
anything that,
section of like, yeah,
yeah, anything that you think
yeah.
we could do
Okay.
to help, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you
Well,
so
Caitlin, thanks
much.
so much. No, it was
This was
awesome.
fun.
That was a really, it was awesome to be able
Yeah.
to kind of pick your brain and hear more about it. And it's a world that, I think it's such a cool thing for you to be doing. And me or anybody
Yeah.
that's listening, we kind of see it from the, perspective of the museum goer, but you don't always think too much about what goes on behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here and
Yeah.
talking a little bit about how you make those decisions. See ya.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by treasurecoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit treasurecoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at treasurecoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.